Hey guys, this is Reed Coverdale again, and you're watching The Naturalist Capitalist. Today I've got Zach with me. How you doing, Zach?
Good. Glad to be here. How you doing?
Doing great. All right, so you are what you would describe as a left-leaning libertarian. Do you want to just describe to everybody what that means exactly?
It's honestly not too different than, what most people would think about a libertarian. There's a lot of things that we would agree on. A lot of things that we would disagree on comes from a lot of stuff like environmentalism, where we say there has to be some regulations at kind of over level to say some things are dangerous and, people take advantage of these things. So it's good to kind of regulate those things, and it's a little bit necessary. But a left libertarian is they're kind of like the mountain hippies that you think of in a tiny little town that doesn't really do anything outside of itself. And
Right.
it's kind of all about self-sufficiency in the same way a libertarian on the right would be, but it also kind of has this community aspect to it where you're whatever community you're in or you choose to be in, or you're kind of participating in that community. It's not it kind of gets crazy when you start talking about this stuff at 320 million people or whatever we have in this country, but it's really easy to think of a left libertarian when you scale it down. There's a town with 25 people or 25 families in it. A couple of
Hmm.
them are good hunters and they share the meat, and a couple of them have enough land to have a good farm and they grow corn and beans. And you know it's very much not. I mean, it can range, from anything like some people think of like a kibbutz in Israel as a
Hmm.
kind of left libertarian commune kind of thing, but it
Right.
can be very, very structureless, where
Uh,
the decisions that the town makes kind of is just based on the flow and people dealing with things. So, instead of a town getting together and really saying, we're going to grow this amount of beans, corn, and whatever, it's kind of more, what does the town want? What are they leaning towards? And it kind of just, the people talk to each other and work things out, and it never really gets to a, like what would be considered a legislative process. It
right.
kind of just gets solved through, and this is easier to do because it's so small. This is why
Right.
it gets crazy when you scale it up. But when you're dealing with a close knit group of people who all know each other, it's very easy to be like, hey, I'm thinking of growing a patch of whatever this year in this section.
Right.
And if people are into it, they're like, yeah, yeah, cool. And it kind of happens. These little
So
trial
when
runs
it,
and
when it
agreements.
comes to 320 million people, what is your vision of what the federal government should be like? Like, what are their limitations? How far should they go? What should they be allowed to be in control of?
Yeah. The way I think about it is like the federal government, a big kind of overarching government watching over things. I think the like baseline purpose of that is helping the people, right? Whether it be protection from an invading army to uh, getting people protective equipment in a pandemic. The
Mm-hmm.
government should, at its base level, make all of its decisions just on that. How can we kind of just sit back a little bit and then help where help is needed? But it's a
Yep.
very, my idea for a federal government, an overarching one, is very scaled back compared to what it is now. And
Mm-hmm.
then states would have more power. And even within the states, you get counties you scale it down, and then you give the counties and these scaled down little groups more power to have a voice. And
Right.
the idea is, say within Colorado, if there were pockets all over the state of different communes or different, however we decide to draw the groups or towns, whatever it is, when they all kind of have more of a voice that they're working with each other with to make state decisions,
Right.
it's very kind of different than the process we have now, where whatever, five or however many people sit on the Colorado Supreme Court, nine probably. There's a lot of decisions that are made by a very small number of people, and those
Mm-hmm.
small number of people can be bought off really easily. And it's
Yeah.
not for a lot, and not, it can be pretty cheap too. Like, I'll give you a couple $1,000s to make this ad, and then
Mm-hmm.
you just introduce this bill, And that's
Yeah.
a problem. And I think one of the things that happens kind of naturally when you scale things down to a smaller level is it gets harder to hide those things. And
Oh, yeah.
there's more transparency when you're all kind of working together on a smaller basis. It's easier to keep track of things.
Yeah, so I don't even think a right libertarian would really disagree with anything you said there because I think what they're I would say I'm not like a hard right libertarian. I'm probably slightly more right than left, but I think we kind of all agree on that. The federal government and a small group of people should not be running 300 million people. I mean, if each community, like you said, wants to have its own government, that is more representative of what those communities want. It's sort of this one size fits all approach that we've garnered in the last 100 years or so. That's just kind of destroying everything, and it's attempted to bring people up, but what it's really done is just kind of brought people down, in my opinion. It's done the opposite of what it's supposed to do.
Yeah, and I feel like also things are very slow to update. And there's a couple like when you look at like a House representative, it's supposed to be about 700,000 people per representative.
Hmm.
That right there is a huge number. You
Yeah,
know, how is one person in this country going to represent 700,000 people, even if they are, kind of close together?
right.
That's a lot of people. And
Yeah.
I think there's some exceptions in like I want to say it's Montana, but don't quote me on that. It's one of the states that only has one delegate, but the state has
Mhm.
like 1.1 or 2 million people in it. So
Right.
they're just like, oh, we can't give you a second delegate, so your entire state gets one vote, and shrug it off. And that's a really good way to make everybody feel like their voice doesn't actually matter.
Right.
Like
Yes.
even just, and this is like totally quick off the top of my head, but if like the delegates were responsible only to voters and they had to stay in their districts and kind of, you know, learn what they have to vote on and how they
Right.
have to vote by being in their districts and working with those people. It kind of keeps it from, lobbyists or the backroom dealings with the cigars and,
Right.
whatever it is. And you can kind of keep it in the community and a little bit more transparent. And then the people are very much more accountable.
Yeah, definitely. So, what type of candidates appeal to you? I know you and I both supported Tulsi Gabbard. What do you think about people like Ron Paul or Justin Amash, more right-wing libertarians? Do they appeal to you too, or
Sure.
um,
At the end of the day, me and Tulsi have more policies aligned uh, than any of these other people, Ron
mhm,
Paul. But I do think they're great. War is easily my number one issue.
mhm,
So if you're serious or if you have a good grasp of what's actually happening in foreign policy and you can say with a straight face and good knowledge that you've learned this stuff and you go, okay, these need to end. We're not doing something good here for anybody
right,
involved. That right there is enough for me to be like, if you're serious about it or I think you're serious about it, I would probably support you off that because I think it's such an important issue to take care of.
yeah,
Um, obviously, I don't agree with everything with both of them or a lot of right libertarians, but it's usually the same thing that kind of comes down to economic policy. And honestly, we always bicker at kind of the lower levels of how we would regulate a company. Like we don't necessarily disagree that there should be some regulation at some
mhm,
level, but it's more about the degree. And also, I found there's some more companies that I would want to regulate harder, and some they would want to regulate harder based
mhm,
off of. And it's not like either of us are wrong. But when you look at it, like we would tackle this problem this way, and it would influence these other things. That makes sense. But I
yeah,
would say we should actually we should take out oil subsidies, right?
mhm,
And most libertarians wouldn't disagree about taking away subsidies, but if we could only get one, maybe it would be something else,
right,
or it's these little like nitpicky things is kind of what I find myself arguing with right libertarians on, not necessarily the what we
cool.
want in its essence, which is kind of more we want to be able to choose, have more choice, and have more of a voice, and feel like our individuality is respected and heard, but also we're okay with working with everyone to come to this consensus. It's kind of something I've never really disagreed with. I've never found a libertarian that I've disagreed with on this.
Right. So Tulsi was about as far left as I'd be willing to go, probably. But what issues do you think that right and left libertarians could kind of come to a consensus on? I think it's environmental stuff. You've brought that up. And I think that there can be a libertarian approach to environmental regulation. I don't think it would be a Green New Deal. I think that kind of flies in the
I,
face of everything, but I think there are ways we could meet on those types of things. What do you think?
oh, absolutely. I mean, there's so many issues that we could meet. Climate change is a really good example. And if we could have more honest conversations about this stuff and the media wasn't completely trying to obscure information, it would be a lot easier. Like, okay, our batteries. That's a good one. Right now, all of the batteries and all of the ways we store all of the energy we generate before we send it out to houses and everything, they're stored in batteries that lose a ton of that energy to heat loss. It's just, like a very hot battery and it's just heat loss. That happens all the time. But if you could find a better way to insulate those batteries, I think it was actually Elon Musk who was talking about this. Their company did the math. You could cut the entire world's consumption of energy in half because that's how much energy we lose in heat.
Right.
We wouldn't have to produce any more. We would just cut the entire world's usage in half just from getting rid of the heat loss from the batteries. So there are really, smarter ways to go about climate change and to deal with some of these issues where a lot of the left, like the much further left activists, talk like we need to solve these problems. We're screwed in 12 years. This is a huge problem. Those things like, okay, well, let's take a couple $1 million and invest in some research in some battery insulators, because that just cutting off how much energy we use in half, it's really bad for the electric company and their profits, but it's a really good way to just annihilate a lot of the waste energy and kind of stuff that contributes, a little bit at a time to climate change.
Right. And I think some of the solutions are actually through getting rid of some dumb regulations that we already have that don't allow us to switch to alternative sorts of fuel. And then the other thing that's so aggravating to me is so many people on the left are against nuclear energy when it's not the same thing it was 50 years ago or whatever. It's completely different now, and they just continuously deny it. So I think there are people in the right libertarian camp who have tendencies to want to fix this problem, but they can't meet with people like AOC or people who are just like so far over because they're not willing to hear a more like free market or deregulation solution. It's no, this is the only way. This is the only way, and they get alienated. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and I've met a lot of people who do have that problem. There's some ways to break through it. I found there are some logical arguments they do listen to. It's got to be, made in the right way or framed in the right way.
Right.
But it's not that they're unreasonable. It's just that they get like really intense about like a piece of like rhetoric, and they think it's using this rhetoric in a group is the thing that's raising awareness and fighting for stuff,
Right.
So what happens is kind of after the awareness is there and there's kind of energy behind what the movement started about, you've got kind of a thing like a nonprofit or an organization where people, that's their jobs, that's their lives, and if it came to an end because it worked, that's a problem. And that kind of is also what happens with a lot of charities and why so much money goes to marketing and advertising.
Right. So out of who we have to choose now for president, who is the most intriguing to you? Do you like Howie Hawkins? Do you like Joe Jorgensen or Trump or Biden? Like who's the most acceptable right now?
I personally am not going to be voting for Trump or Biden. That's going to be my choice in this. I do think I'll vote for Joe Jorgensen. Towards the beginning of this, I didn't really research too in depth all of the third-party candidates on either the Green or Libertarian side. I was kind of putting all the energy behind Tulsi. But There's a lot there that's actually we agree on. I don't. The things I disagree with Howie Hawkins are more important to me. Like I disagree more with some things with him. Joe
Right.
Jorgensen, I think, has a lot of really good ideas, but I think also a lot of really she tries to explain things in a lot of really short sentences on her website and get it out quick. And I feel like she would benefit from a little bit more nuance when she talks about these issues. But I don't think she's dumb. She's engaged. She talks to people. She listens to ideas, and she's got some good policy. Day
Yeah.
one, get all the nonviolent drug offenders out of jail,
Mm.
legalize weed. That,
Yeah.
that would be great. I'm 100% behind that. She definitely has some more, I don't know what I'd call it, but like hardcore libertarian ideas. And
Hmm.
it's not that I disagree with all of the hardcore libertarian ideas, but I do think that some of the bigger ones, the bigger structural change ideas, they couldn't happen overnight. And if you tried to go in there as a president, even over 8 years, and say this is the thing I'm changing, gavel down, it could cause a lot of problems. I
Hmm.
think some of the biggest changes, like legitimately, aren't going to happen until we get enough people educated to be like, oh, this is what we want. Put real energy behind it. It becomes a thing over time. People know about it. It's thought about a bunch of different angles, and all the holes that could be poked in it are, and then they're sealed up again with better ideas, and you get
Hmm.
something that should be, working better than if you tried to rush it. But you know, there's a lot of stuff happening right now, and it's kind of hard to talk about incrementalism towards something like that. So there's, I don't exactly have the answer,
Hmm.
especially because a lot of the craziness is going down like as we speak. It's constantly
Yeah.
developing.
Yeah, speaking of all those crazinesses, we're going to talk about a couple of those. One big thing that's going on is censorship online, and that's been a subject for the last couple years. It was kind of funny that Trump got fact checked on Twitter, and that was enough for him to suddenly sign an executive order, and it's really erupted this whole debate. There's so much other stuff going on too that maybe it's not getting the attention it would if that was the only thing. But what do you think about censorship online? Is it something the federal government should have a solution for, or is it something we should solve, or is it so muddled we can't really you don't really know what a good solution would be, or what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, this is definitely a tough one. I was having a conversation with someone the other day who kind of made like a comparison. Was like, there's no warranties or uh, guarantees when it comes to Twitter, their terms of service, and they should because we agreed to the terms of service, they should be allowed to kind of do whatever they want that we agreed to.
Hmm.
As long and that's it's kind of an interesting argument to me. I First off, warranties are not something companies do out of the goodness of their heart. Those are regulated, mandated by some, I don't know which government agency covers that, but they say things like you got to back your products if you're making these claims in advertising. You know, this is how you get out of those claims and false advertising. And there are regulations for these things, so I don't necessarily, again, feel bad about regulating a private company.
Hmm.
It does need to be done right, and that's the really tricky part with something like social media, because and I think what really is making it go kind of back and forth in this debate is Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, all of them. They're growing so big so fast. They were just kind of small websites that didn't really matter, and they're shifting to massive websites where most people go to get their information. And
Hmm.
that shift is, some people are thinking ahead of it and saying we need to, make these adjustments or write these laws before we get to this point. And some people, and I'm not trying to disrespect these people, but they're paying attention to other things, and they're like, what? No, Facebook, Twitter, it's a website. Who
Hmm.
cares? But they're not thinking of it as the public commons, or they're not really thinking of it having as much power to shape public opinion as it does. And
Yeah.
that's where I start to really be like, we have to look at some options,
Uh,
and it's more about accountability to me.
yeah. So Section 320, when I first
230.
started hearing about it, it sounded like there was a cut and dry solution, that there was this idea that they have to either identify as a platform or a publisher, and that they were getting some special treatment as identifying as both. And I was like, oh, okay, here's a solution. And then I read the law, and it's not, there isn't a distinction in that section that describes it as a publisher or a platform. So if we repealed Section 230, it would actually just hold Twitter and Facebook and YouTube accountable for anything that anybody posted on there. So it actually makes the problem worse if you get rid of that law completely, because then they would have to vet every single post because they're responsible as a publisher for everything that goes.
To be fair, that's like entirely impossible. There's
right.
Too many. You cannot. We don't have enough manpower. They don't have enough money to buy enough employees to actually moderate every single tweet or every single video.
Right.
So the idea is that would be such a big problem for them that they would have to say step back and be like hands off about it. And I understand that. And I read the thing, Trump's draft too, and like the thing I took away from it, like it's in the second section, is I think the main goal of this thing is to clearly define platform. Like it puts a lot of energy into the verbiage of how we're defining a platform and how we're defining a publisher. Sorry,
right.
Defining publisher and what it means to put out content with a curated timeline. I think I actually saved something for this. Sorry, I forgot to pull up my pictures.
It's all good. So while you're looking for that, I got one question. What kind of worries me about this is if we open the door to the federal government removing protections from companies that challenge them, do you think that will stop with social media, or do you think you could see that in other areas that are kind of scary? You know what I mean? Like, what if, like, say, Remington rifles would probably be more likely to support a Republican presidential candidate. What if the Democrats said, okay, if you guys are such a big influence and you're such a big company, if you're going to openly support a candidate, we're going to hold you liable for mass shootings that happen with Remington rifles. Like that's just kind of an example of something they could start pushing. I understand with social media, it's a little bit different because it's not a company producing something, it's a platform. But just if we open that door, are you worried with where that could go?
Well, I am. It very much depends on how a law that regulates this is worded. And it would have to be kind of careful because I don't think it should be so much restrictions or like harsh liabilities for Facebook and Twitter. What I kind of feel like we should do is find a way to take the burden off of them, right? Because so much of what's happening is caused by people who are like, I don't want to see this content. I don't want to, this is bad, or I need you to regulate this kind of content. And I think one of the best answers Twitter or Facebook or YouTube or anyone could do at a social media site is like develop tools for the user. You give them a little toolbar in the website, and this helps you let them edit more things. I want to only see posts like this, or only see things, give them just more than just a block or mute button, and I think a lot of that could help the outrage mobs that keep attacking people, and also a lot of the kind of clickbait. And I think taking more of a, like right now we're just kind of threatening all these social media companies one way or the other. It kind of ends really bad. And I think one of the better things we could do is say like, okay, look, we're not going to, we'll remove the, your live, we'll make sure you're protected from what other people say on your website, so long as you don't try and do this, or you give it, if we're going to regulate it and try and enforce the First Amendment, that should only be done by the government, and that should also only protect legal speech. And there's a lot to this. They are a private company, and right now be allowed to make.
They're actually like slightly regulated. I was reading under Section 230. They're not liable as long as they don't publish something, but if they support, like if they retweet something, or if they support like terrorism on Twitter or something, then they can be held liable. So there already is a little bit of regulation. But what you're saying is pretty much have them remove any vetting process and put that burden on the user instead, right? So like whatever comes on, and then as a user, you set up your own filters, and then that way you're held responsible for whatever you see, so you can't sue Twitter for something somebody else puts on there. Is that kind of what you're saying?
Yeah, sort of. I mean, and it's not like even a well thought out idea necessarily, but
Uh-huh.
I think there's has to be an option where we say we understand that people can say shitty things on your website, and we
Hmm.
don't want to hold you accountable for the shitty things people said on your website, but you do have the power to change a lot of opinions, and when they can kind of take your tweet and be like, no, that's wrong, here's the truth, uh, without any oversight or accountability necessarily. We're supposed to trust the company that Facebook, made a deal with and a contract with that's not always necessarily public, or
Hmm.
it gets sketchy when they start to edit things, right?
Hmm.
That's and I think like that whatever pressure's driving Facebook and Twitter to feel like they have to edit it so that they appease an angry mob, that's kind of where I think the root of the problem is. And if we can stop it there, then the crazy forced censorship because they feel like they have to be viewed in a certain way will kind of slow down.
Yeah. Did you find what you were looking for there, or?
Yeah, this is from Section 2, the first paragraph of Section 2 in Trump's thing. It's just right in the middle. It says, it is the policy of the United States that the scope of that immunity should be clarified. The immunity should not exceed beyond its text and purpose to provide protection for those who purport to provide users a forum for free and open speech. Um, it's really just saying, look, you guys, you said you're a platform for free and open speech, and
Mhm.
uh, we want to clarify what it means to be an editor, kind of, or a publisher of that speech, so
Yeah.
that there's less confusion, but also so that if we cross a line that we're drawing in the sand now, that you could be held liable for that. And
Hmm.
then this kind of seems like what would happen is it would be only if the social media site in question really, really is like they wanted to push the agenda and they tried to do the stuff in the background, they could be held liable for it. Be like,
Right.
this isn't cool that you have these biases or taking these down, but this doesn't. I don't. They don't necessarily have to be sued immediately from this. Trump wouldn't win a case necessarily against him if
Right.
this law passes. It's not like Twitter's in trouble. He would then have to go to sue them.
Yeah.
So I don't think Trump could win a case against Twitter right now with what they've actually done with him and how he's worded this law. But I do think he used the energy of being censored on Twitter to kind of rile up his movement around making this law. I think
Yeah.
it's a little bit pandering because I don't think it
Yeah.
really does too much, but it seems like it does.
Yeah.
We define them as a this, and then they're a platform if they cross this line, but
Yeah.
they haven't even crossed that line yet.
Right.
So, so I think
Um,
this is kind of nothing.
yeah. The thing about him is he's so inflammatory all the time. Like he might have made this specific order, but then yesterday he was tweeting repeal Section 230. So he makes this really specific. I doubt he writes that executive order. I'm sure somebody else wrote it for him, and he probably just read it and approved it. But he goes on Twitter and he just keeps saying these ridiculous things like we're going to shut you down if you if you say something we disagree with. So I think that's why we're getting a lot of visceral reactions from people because of the crazy stuff he's just saying. Like it might not be as bad as what he's saying because he always does that. He always has some ridiculous thing he says, and his follow up is never nearly as serious as what he's threatening to do.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, he's really good at kind of making a scene about things,
Hmm.
getting his base excited. I don't. Yeah, I mean, I don't think he's really there to try and challenge much. I think he's there to. He likes being a celebrity,
Yeah.
So he's not trying to piss off the establishment because that's bad for his businesses once he gets out,
Yeah.
and he doesn't want to piss all of us off because he loves the attention and the love from his base.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
totally. Um, so something that ties into all this, the reason these laws exist is because Twitter can get sued for something that somebody else says. I feel like that's why we have a lot of dumb laws. I feel like that's why a lot of insurance prices on things are so high, why people are scared to do anything anymore. So what do you think about frivolous lawsuits getting approved and people being able to sue for ridiculous amounts of money? Um, some people would disagree with me, but this lawsuit that Tulsi Gabbard just dropped against Hillary Clinton, I actually thought when that lawsuit first came out that it was ridiculous. And the reason I was upset about it was because even though I hate Hillary Clinton and I totally agreed with Tulsi's sentiment about powerful people just saying stuff like this um, and affecting people's opinions. When you start approving lawsuits like that, somebody says something in an interview, they don't even name you by name, and they make a kind of backhanded accusation. If you can sue someone for $50 million for something that vague and get away with it, what does that open the door to? Obama could sue Trump for the birther thing, or Rand Paul could sue Lindsey Graham and John McCain. So then everyone is not even they're gonna be so scared of saying anything or challenging anyone because, whoa, what if I say this person is doing this, but I'm partially wrong? They could sue me for $50 million. So do you think that the courts have a responsibility to not pass these really stupid lawsuits? Do you think that's kind of affecting everything that's going on and making prices go up and just causing trouble in general?
what I know is we need to find a way really to get rid of that hyperinflated rhetoric about everything. And I don't think we'll be able to legislate that away. I think that's kind of like a thing we as a society got to sit down and be like, okay, a lot of these are hyper exaggerated. Lawyers end up super happy, wanted to try these crazy cases, and the media is happy about it. They both make a lot of money from these things, and they kind of hurt. They do hurt everyone else. They really do. And it's not just about even insurance premiums.
Hmm.
It's kind of everything where it becomes a culture of I have to set up my business in a way where everything I do is starting from like on the defensive. You know,
Right.
it's set up in a way where, oh, I have to think about it so that I can't be attacked for this, or how it's set up, or uh, kind of, you know.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. um, so kind of switching subjects here. The other thing that's been going on is there was that video of that police officer in Minneapolis who obviously murdered that guy. And there's been a ton of backlash from that. I feel like there's a couple things going on. There's obviously racial issues with the police. That's pretty hard to deny. If you're a black person, you definitely have a higher chance of being abused by the police. There's no doubt about that. But I feel like the war is shifting in the wrong direction now. Like I think this is really a state versus the public problem, and it's almost turning into a race war. And I think that some people in the media actually want that. So how do we get people convinced
There's some
that,
malarkey going on
yeah,
around all that situation. There's some definite malarkey.
yeah. So how do we get people, like I think there are a lot of people who realize this state problem, but they're going to end up on opposite sides of this race war that's starting. How do we unite those two factions and say, look, we're both against the same abusive state and we need to unite? Like those people who were protesting in Michigan a month ago who stormed the Capitol building or whatever. The same people who are protesting now, they're almost on the opposite side from those people. How do we get them to be like, hey guys, you're both angry at the same thing. You're angry at the government abusing you. Join together. That's the establishment's biggest fear if you guys unite against them.
We really have to kind of shift the narrative. There's a lot of narrative crafting in the media, and it just stokes the flames of this kind of race war. It frames everything as a white person did, black person did, kind of view, and it's that really stokes the flames of it. But I think shifting the way we think about it to a class war is kind of what we need. It's, a lot of these hyper rich people who are just in, wherever they are right now, far away in their rich people bunkers away from the virus, just making decisions for everyone else. And it's kind of gross. And there's just so much structural change that needs to happen. And so much of it is centered around these massive corporations, or not even a corporation, but someone who has so much money that they can just almost make the world in their image. It's just like, my opinion is so great, I'm going to flood money to make sure everyone has my opinion. And it's certainly an unfair advantage if you want to think about how our elections are run, and who pays for what, and why they have to pay for those things, and how much those things cost. Like one of the best examples I have from this election is the DNC voter rolls. To get those in Iowa, I think it was, you had to go, and there was this conference or talk on justice, right, and criminal justice, and everyone went. It was kind of like a town hall. It wasn't a debate, and they went and spoke at it. And you had to pay to get into this. All the candidates had to pay to get into this. It was like $750,000, and you went there and you talked at this DNC fundraiser about justice, and then you would get the DNC voter rolls, which is very, very important information for a campaign about where Democrats are located, or where people, who voted most and stuff like that. So, Tulsi, obviously, she didn't pay for that. That's a gigantic waste of money.
Right.
I want to go talk to the people, but that's still, I feel like, a ridiculous hurdle that they just kind of put in place.
Right.
And
I think we'll probably agree on some of this. I think the solution to that problem is actually giving the government less power, because I am in support of campaign finance reform and things like that. But I think the reason we have lobbyists and we have so much money in politics is because those politicians can grant so many special interests to corporations and powerful rich people. I understand hating the rich people, but everyone kind of gives the government a pass. They go straight to the people who are profiting from this, and they don't realize to get rid of this corrupt system, you have to hold the government accountable, because if the government isn't there to bail out the corporations, give them subsidies, give them whatever they want, to give all these arms dealers all these, giant grants or whatever, then we won't have this issue. What do you think about that? Do you think it's kind of both things, or?
Yeah, honestly, there's a lot to do about this, because the kind of power from this comes from a lot of places, like weird decisions that money is speech, or a corporation is a person. That was a really weird decision to me that the Supreme Court's made, that the corporation is a person, because it's very obviously not. And the companies and the government, they're kind of like competing businesses, and they're both stifling each other right now.
Yeah,
that's not good. But also, it's such a tough answer when it comes to this, especially when it comes to campaign finance reform, or when it comes to how it affects our elections. Lobbyists are a tricky thing, because I feel like they give a bigger, it's kind of what goes back to what we were talking about earlier. They have a big voice for the company that they represent. They don't represent 700,000 people and their opinions and kind of get muddled in it. They represent one person, one opinion, who goes to Congress.
right.
And I don't necessarily know how to legislate that away. It's kind of, I don't know.
I support campaign finance reform as a step in the right direction, but I think the ultimate goal is removing that power from the government to give all these special interests to everybody, because then the purpose of lobbyists just evaporates, because then what are they going to do? Why would they be so invested? The only reason they're so invested is because the government has all this power to dole special deals out to all these different companies and arms dealers and everything. So I think it's weird. I think a lot of progressives and libertarians need to stop fighting each other on how to get to this reform. I think they need to realize that they have the same common goals and that both of their ideas can work in that direction. But progressives have just kind of they've kind of made this idea that libertarians are pro-corporate, and then libertarians cast progressives as though they're just like totally in favor of big government in every form. And like neither of those is really true. They're both looking for the same thing. And I want them to just
We need
like,
to kind of think about it like our civics. A branch of this is going to be companies and what they produce and what they need to produce it, and their interaction with us, people who have voices and can affect change, and then the government who oversees both to make sure, almost acting like a ref, and it should work like a check and balance system, kind of how our government is supposed to work. But
mhm.
I think one of the biggest issues is transparency. You know, like money is not even the biggest problem, because if we had like real transparency for what's going on behind the scenes, if people knew the truth, if it wasn't being hidden from them, you know, by media or however it's being hidden, that's going to be one of the biggest ways to actually start working together and start really realizing who's taking away our rights and who's making us fight each other.
Right. So, I'm hope that this whole experience we're going through right now is terrible and all, and a ton of people are suffering from it. I'm hoping that we come out of it positively, and I think the positive things that can come out of it is people realizing who the enemy really is. I mean, that should be more obvious right now. You know, the media and the government and the
I
overly powerful state.
I, I made a
So I'm
tweet I
hoping
think
people
yesterday.
like come together and realize that, and I think it's starting to happen. I think the scales are falling away. Like I did love seeing CNN's headquarters get sacked yesterday. That was perfect.
I loved watching the videos where they were covering it and kind of like just over the top dramatic. Oh, this is where we work. This is our home. But it's kind of like, okay, dial it back a little
Yeah.
bit. Yeah, I mean, I made a tweet and I said in it as like the three biggest weapons that oligarchs will use against us are the media, the police, and Congress. And it's
Mhm.
not just to say that Congress is bad. Every member of Congress is like totally fucked up, but the leadership is very much bought off. If you look at the way they act versus what they say, and in almost every one of the big leadership roles, whether it's Pelosi or Schiff or Schumer, whoever's kind of at the top in these areas, they're the ones that are just almost completely bought off.
Right.
They're worth hundreds of millions of dollars. They insider trade all day because there's nothing that's stopping them. They they they're kind of and this is what I mean by like the transparency and getting the truth out and getting through this obfuscation of the media. When people realize, okay, what's happening is there are essentially three people in the government who are really making our lives miserable. One is Trump. He's just not really making any right decisions about this stuff. And the other
Mhm.
two are McConnell and Pelosi,
Yeah.
because and they hold almost equal power. Like they both can block bills from ever getting voted on in their respective of the Congress or the House or the Senate. They they get to kind of add things to anything that gets put through. They're just kind of like in charge. If they don't want something to be voted on, those two people, it just doesn't get voted on. So
Hmm.
whatever they don't agree with is just something that's not going to happen. If they agree on something, that's the only policies that could get passed in America, because those are the only policies they're willing to put up for votes. That's how they play each other now. Oh, I'm not going to vote for your thing unless you give me what I want, or I'm not going to let people vote. It's not even I'm not going to vote. I'm not going to let anyone practice democracy. I'm not
Yeah.
going to do that. Don't do that here.
Yeah, no, and it's a kind of a terrifying thought to think of what legislation McConnell, Trump, and Pelosi will agree on. So that's what we're getting right
The
now.
CARES Act, the
Yeah,
one that it just
yep,
gutted the middle class. And
yep.
again, this is people like, and this is kind of something I have a little bit of a beef with Tulsi Gabbard with right now, and AOC, and almost every single person. There are a couple few who I don't, but they they're just kind of obscuring the truth. They're saying, "Oh, look at this bill, we're helping people," and they're doing the total politician thing where they added a little extra side bill that got cut in half before it got added. Then
Yep.
whatever Tulsi's was like some money for nurses and tests in Hawaii, and then
Yep.
someone else adds a thing that's some money for roads here because access to a laboratory, whatever it is. Whatever
Yep.
you added into that little bill, it gets cut up, and then you get your little token prize that you can go back to your state and stand on and be like, look at this. It's called the Heroes Act. It's for the heroes. It's and it's really disgusting, especially because they like Nancy Pelosi's done some just unbelievable things with that Heroes Act. Like add in as like student debt relief, not a full pay your student loans off, but it was like you could get up to $10,000 of student loan debt forgiven. And then everyone was like, "Oh my God, that's kind of cool. I'd like this bill to pass." And then she just gutted it, like she cut it in half and then just removed it. She's like, "Yeah, no, we're not going to do that either." And there are a couple of examples of that where she just took, like, she's like, "Oh, look, this has this, and this," and then she took it out, and she's like, "Oh, but also, it's a $3 trillion bill, and we're not giving you any of it."
Yeah.
She's super upfront about that.
Yeah.
But then she'll go do interviews saying, "We need these things for Americans," and she knows McConnell's not on board, so it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
They could pass those, like, and this is something I really don't understand. They know McConnell's going to not let these things be voted on, so Pelosi could just do the best grandstanding in the world and be like, Medicare for all. Pff, it's
Mhm.
happening. We're sending it to the Senate, knowing full well that because of their conversation at lunch, Mitch is just going to shoot it down. It's just
Yeah.
not going to happen. And it could
Yeah.
go the other way too, where it's like, I'm going to pander to the Republicans, but the evil Democrats, the socialist bastards, they want to come for your. No, they're both on the same team. They're
Oh
the
yeah.
same people. They're
Yeah.
backed by the same money. They, they,
Yeah. I think
there's
that
friends behind the scenes, all of them. Even
the guy
RBG and Skilla, and Anthony Skilla. I forget how
uh
I pronounce his name, or I forget it. But they were friends behind the scenes, and not just like work acquaintances. Like there's like legitimate friends. It's like, okay, you're like when we're in our robes, I'm fighting you, you hellish anti-abortion woman, or anti
mhm.
whatever.
Yeah.
They're bickering about gun control and abortion. Those are pretty much the only two issues they really disagree on, and you go back and forth to pander.
Yeah.
There's nothing in between those two. They agree on everything else. Just
Yeah.
like,
Yeah, no, I mean, I think the guy I'm really impressed with in Congress right now is Thomas Massey, and
I
it's
was gonna
because
say,
he's just willing to say no, 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 and it's gotten to the point where people just have to vote against these bills because they might get
they're
their
not.
little half amendments like you're saying, they'll sneak them in, but we're way past the point where the terrible legislation is far outrunning the stupid little amendments we get. So I'm at the point where I'm just not going to vote for anyone who's not willing to just say no. I've been watching, the
I mean, look
representatives
at
from.
AOC. AOC will sit there and be like, "These bills are terrible. They don't have this in it. They don't do this. Like they're not good for you." And then she's voted on all of them.
Yeah.
Like it's funny because the CARES Act, they didn't record, like, there's like a phone vote or something, and they didn't record, they didn't verify who was voting yes or no, so there's no list.
Right.
And then when reporters asked her office about it, they were like, "Oh, she would have voted no, but," and it's like, you just gave away everything. Like
Yeah.
no one knows which way people voted until her own office was like, "Well, she would have voted no, but," and and then for the next one, like she was in hot water from people. They were like, "Oh, what the hell? That's not cool. This bill is terrible. Why would you vote for it? If it was going to pass anyway, you could have been taking a stand." So the next bill comes
Yeah.
around. It's like we're I'm gonna say no, and then she voted yes. It was like Ro Khanna and a handful of other people voted no, but it was like
Yeah.
conveniently two or three people short from the amount of people they needed to block it from going to the Senate or to get it reviewed or something.
Yeah.
And it always happens like that. There's always enough Democrats or Republicans on the side that helps the establishment. And then
Yeah.
you wonder, why would my representative vote that way? That's not on our values. But
Yeah.
then it just dies. No one talks about it, and everyone gets memory hold so easy. They forget,
Yeah.
like, I think it's,
Yeah,
I don't want to blame people like being stupid, but the way our media works, the news cycle, the fact that it's just like a nonstop stream of information from an unrelenting horde of sources, it gets, you get fatigue from it.
yeah,
Unless like unless you love really like reading into this, finding the narratives and like finding what's true. That's not like you really love it. You will get fatigued from this. It's just a constant stream of
yeah.
information and stuff to deal with. So it's understandable to kind of be memory hold, but it's also surprising how much people forget things that happened months ago.
Yeah. No, I made a tweet last night where I said, stop making stupid excuses for your representatives. And what everyone's saying is, and I'll use Tulsi Gabbard because she was the one I supported too. I see so many Tulsi supporters just bending over backwards in every which way to defend every single thing she does. And I've said, look, you can't do that. George W. Bush could have been a good president in good times. He was a bad president because of what happened. Like if 9/11 hadn't happened, he could have been great. But we blame him for the Patriot Act and the war in Iraq, the war in Afghanistan, and that's what we hold him accountable for. So we should be holding our politicians accountable for what they're doing now in tough times, and especially the ones that we supported. I was a heavy supporter of Tulsi Gabbard, so I should be the first one to call her out when she's not doing what I thought she would. And to me, the most dangerous thing is people uh, aligning themselves behind politicians and just defending whatever they do, because then you're abdicating your conscience and what is right, and you're just letting whatever happens. So that's a big thing I've been trying to get
It's
people
like
to stop.
politics are kind of trendy, so politicians kind of become celebrities, and then
Right,
it's so close to celebrity culture and how people back celebrities, you know,
right.
and it's kind of weird to see. It's like technically they're employees of ours that we're supposed to hire and fire if they're not doing the job we want. So to treat them like they're on this pedestal, like, oh, hooray, our represent, I'm so proud of them, and we're team colors and team sports and whatever it is. That is not at all the way it should be.
Yeah,
And we shouldn't have a problem in America being able to say, oh, hey, this guy's making decisions I don't like. Let's kick him out and find
yeah,
someone better. There's just no reason to not say that. We're the one who vote them in. We can rally. Okay, we got 2 years or 4 years or whatever the cycles are for all these different positions, and we're going to work on a way to vet them better next time. You can get a new one every cycle if you're till you get the right fit. You know,
yeah,
there's just no reason to have that kind of celebrity worship, to have this like team sports mentality about it. Like oh god, the person who represents me sucks, and if I say that, people are going to think that I suck because I voted for him. I'm stupid, or I whatever it is. And people are so afraid to be wrong. Like this is something that I feel like is happening. I don't know why, but it's happening because of internet culture. It's just people are so afraid to be wrong.
yeah,
And when they are, it becomes this defensive argument that's nitpicking semantics almost every time. Okay, well, I could be right in these situations. If I change what I misinterpreted what you were saying, but if you said what I thought you said, or if you said what I wanted you to say, then I'm right.
right.
And there's enough times where, okay, a good example is from last night. Was, someone, a blue checked someone, and he made a thread about something, but I was late. I was kind of tired. I just saw the first tweet. And I didn't see that it was a thread. So I commented on the first tweet as if that was the only tweet, right? And a couple of people jump in like, oh, he's a closet Trump supporter, ignore him or whatever, just insult me. I was like, hey, that's not true. But I didn't see that it was a thread. My bad. That my comment's
Yeah,
wrong. Just ignore it,
yeah,
And I don't delete that shit. That's on Twitter. You go look, you're like, oh hey, here Zach, here's all the times you're wrong because you admit it. I just searched the word wrong.
yeah,
And the world doesn't end. People don't hate you most of the time. It's okay to be wrong because you don't learn otherwise. And that's okay. I'm wrong. Teach me the correct information, and then I get to be right going forward more of the time. I'm happy about that. It's one of the reasons I like arguing with people on Twitter or in life, is to be able to find holes in my own argument
Right.
because
Yeah. I mean, I,
I want the best idea. I want to have it. I'm like, no, my idea is ironclad. You can't poke a hole in it, but you only get there if you've tried to poke holes in it everywhere and found that you can't.
right. Yeah. I mean, my Twitter account, I originally made it for Tulsi Gabbard just for voting in polls or whatever. And then after she dropped out, I realized the big the big upheaval going on politically and how I disagreed with where a lot of people were headed from the conclusions of what was going on. And I said, okay, well, I can make a difference here. So I turned my account into what it is now. And I have a very diverse group of following. I have, socialists and communists and capitalists and libertarians and progressives. And what I try to do on the channel, on the page is like get conversations where people start asking questions. And what's aggravating is a lot of people come to these conversations just to prove the other side wrong. They don't come to learn anything or hear anything.
Hmm.
But when you started following me and I started following you, I realized that about you, that you are there looking for solutions, and that's what I'm doing too. But yeah, we're kind of running low on time here, but I'll give you the last word and just talk about what you're trying to do on Twitter, like what you're trying to get people to think
Yeah,
about and what you
it's
want to
actually
see happen.
I joined Twitter in 2016 just to stuff happening around the election. I wasn't really interacting with anything. I was kind of reading stuff, and then I
Hmm.
put it down for a couple of years, and then it was like 2000, I think October 2018 when I kind of got back into it because I started to notice that all of the media stories that were coming out that I saw on Facebook or I read on their own websites sourced from Twitter. Like person's opinion on this, or here's a video clip that someone took doing this. And I was like, okay, well, all of what, like, I went and looked it up, all the tweets, and I was like, these are like 2 days before the media reports on most of these things. So I started just kind of getting on to like, okay, where's their information coming from? Can I interact with that and kind of be in the know the same way they are? Because this is where information is coming from now for some reason.
Hmm.
And kind of when I got there, I was surprised. I didn't really expect Twitter to be the way it is. I love Twitter. It's one of my favorite social media sites. I think it's like, well, because I love the discussion. I kind of fell into it. It's like a giant chat room that you're all a part of. And
Yeah.
I've gotten in like pun contests with a hairdresser in Brooklyn and like crazy things. And I've talked to a lot of people who I never would have talked to, learned ideas I never would have thought of because
Yep.
I posted the dumbest, like I had a thought, I thought it was cool or funny or smart, and I put it up and someone trashes me. And because I try not to be like, oh, you asshole, you attacked me and go into that defensive mood or mode. I try to, be like, oh, what, was I wrong? You know, try to engage with that. If I'm, if they're just are trolling or trying to get outrage from me, that happens all the time. And
Yeah.
you gotta move on from that. Mute button's great, but I think it's very different. I know if I post something on Facebook, the only people who are really going to see it are my old friends from high school.
Right.
I don't have a big Facebook following. I don't have a page there, so
Hmm.
it seems very echo chambery. But I've like posted thoughts and had people comment from around the world, and I think that's really cool. I also think there's a part of kind of why the media is the way it is right now is because they're sourcing from Twitter, and there's no we as a society haven't set up like what we think are good boundaries for that. We haven't we as a society like haven't kind of agreed yet that when you see a journalist source from a Twitter account that was made this month and has 3 tweets and 1 follower, that that doesn't count as a credible source, you
Right.
know. And so people read these, oh, it was in a tweet. The media reported they said it was in a tweet. So they're removed from the liability of posting whatever nonsense they want. And they can you can make a sock puppet account on Twitter with 1 follower the next day, say whatever you want, and then source your own information. It's not hard, and
Hmm.
there's no way to deal with that right now. And
Right.
any ideas I would lay out would piss people off, like verifieds can't make multiple accounts, or certain
Hmm.
things that are like if you are a person whose Twitter and YouTube are deciding your authoritative sources, your authoritative news, they need to kind of prove that. They need to keep up with a constant like, here's why we deserve to be called someone who can do this, someone who can fact check this and make sure it's true, because there's no accountability right now. They just kind of can say something's true.
Right.
It destroys the public trust, and that kind of it makes people form these teams, and the teams aren't very big. They're these like fractured tribes, because you can only ever trust so far if there's no real there's no real way to judge the information is true. It's coming from you. Like you can be next to your friends and family and your closer network, and you know them, and you can learn about them, and you can trust them. But when all this stuff is going on, and it can really like affect your life if you get these things wrong, or if you get affected by these things, or accidentally go viral for the wrong opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Cancel culture is a part of this whole thing that's not great about social media right now. And
Yeah.
there's no legislative process for that. We kind of, as a society, have to realize that this is new tech, this is new stuff, and we should sit down and start really making like definitions for things. And that's almost why I like Trump's executive orders, because that at its core is what it does. I want to define this thing as this, so it's more clear for everyone. And if I don't, it's a draft, they might change things, but whether or not you like how he wants to enact or clarify things, I think that is a good thing to do. Try and re-clarify things, try and start us all on a foundation that we're all on the same level. We all have the same information. We can all agree that this is where we're going to operate from and go from there. And that, the truth is important. We really got to break through these fake narratives if we want to start finding real solutions, because a lot of the people who will attack you on these social media sites are just misinformed. They're not dumb or assholes. They're just, their whole life they've been told to trust this source. They've never known why they shouldn't, and they don't, read everything like some of us do. So they don't really know that it's bad information, or they don't know how something that they support a policy could affect their lives in a way they're not thinking about. And we need a way to have a baseline of agreements, some things like how we approach certain situations, even cancel culture, how we like, okay, we're going to stop at the rage mobs, and here's how we as develop methods. It's not going to be a ubiquitous thing. No one's going to agree. Not everyone is going to agree on everything or anything, really. But I do think that the information, the truth, that's a source of solving all of these problems, all of them, the wars, the riots, the wealth transfers to the billionaires. All of these things are just so obscured, and Nancy Pelosi can say, we're only doing things that help you, without talking about things that could hurt you that seem like they're helping you. Oh, we bailed out the airline because we don't want them to go under. You guys want to travel, right? But there was no real reason to do that. It sounds nice and people don't think too hard about it, but that's very clearly from Nancy Pelosi. It's a mirage. She's painting a picture. It's not really there, so people are more than happy to back her. And she plays the team sports hard. And almost everyone who supports her is just on the team. But they also don't know all true information. I probably don't know. I try obsessively to find what's true in every story I see, and I probably have some that I'm completely misinformed on. And the fake news and the lies are a problem, and I don't think there's a legislative way to totally get rid of it like Trump wants to. Twitter wants to curate their website the way they want to, and that's kind of a legit argument. But they also have the power to shape public opinion and need some oversight, and that's a legit argument. And the problem is, most people won't sit down and talk like us. Maybe you don't want to regulate them in some ways, or maybe I would want to regulate them. And what happens is, like, if there are some people on the left who even follow me that it's like, oh my God, you're making libertarian content, that's super right wing, and they'll just call me closet Trump supporter and block me. There are people like that, and some of it is like it just grows. The more we're separated, the more these groups like other each other. These guys are the other. The more was, and so like kind of what we were talking about at the very beginning. How do we get past this race war and turn it into like a unified workers' rebellion, or whatever you want to call it?
Yeah,
But
I mean, I think
I
the
think it's
more
the
we have,
conversations, the realizations, like you were talking about, that a lot of our opinions are actually the same, and our
yeah,
goals are the same. And if we can come together to work on a way to complete the goals, it shouldn't matter. The goal is the thing we want to do, not the process of completing it.
yeah,
So
no,
we
I
should be able to
think
talk.
I think the more we have the other mentality, the more those people in charge gain more power. Um, but hey, man, I want to thank you for coming on. I'll definitely have you back on again. If you guys want to follow us on Twitter, I'm at Reed Coverdale, the naturalist capitalist. What's your username?
Mine's at the Ice Monkey, it's all one word, 72. I gotta change that. It's kind of an old one. Way younger.
Well, thanks for coming on, Zach. We'll do it
Yeah,
again,
thanks for
and
having me.
thanks
It was
for
a great conversation, and I look forward to some more. Let's bridge some gaps and get people thinking about solutions that accomplish goals we can both agree on, right and left, and then I think that'll scare the establishment. When we're
absolutely.
really like when we can unify and say we want the same goals, we'll get it done. We'll work together to get it done. That's that's where we need to head. That's
Absolutely.
really what needs to happen. Yeah.
All right. Thanks for
Thank you.
tuning in, everyone. We'll catch you next time.